Hello and welcome to our new YouTube tutorial. It's been a few months since we released our last video, but now we're back and we're going to continue creating the content more frequently and consistently. So in this video we're going to create a React application with Context API and React hooks. Those features are getting more and more popular today, and that's why we decided to use them. So the application is going to be a task manager. First of all, before we start to create it, let's go ahead and describe what this application is all about. As you can see here in the center of the page, we have our nice looking app. It consists of an input field in which we can enter some tasks like read the book. Once we click the add task button or just press the enter key, the task will be added and displayed down below. Let's add one more task. Let's say wash the car. Okay, so as you can see here on the right hand side of each task, they have two different buttons to delete the task and to edit it. So if I click the delete button, then the task will be removed from the list. And if I click the edit button, then the content of the task will be displayed inside of the input field. Also, the button will be changed from add to edit. So if I change the text here, let's add wash the car today, and then click the edit button, the task will be updated. And also the text of the button will be changed back to add. Alright, let's go ahead and add a couple of dummy tasks. So if I reload the page, then you will find that all the tasks are saved despite the refreshing the page. And it happens because we saved them in a browser local storage. The last thing that I want to show you is that we have here another button called clear, which actually allows us to clear the entire list. Alright, so that's it, what we're going to create throughout this video. Again, we will use React with Context API and hooks, so I expect that you already know at least the basics of JavaScript and React, and also Context API and React hooks. So let's go ahead and start building this application from scratch. Here on the desktop I have created a new folder called React App. Let's go ahead and open it using VS Code. Actually, we're going to use VS Code throughout this tutorial as a text editor, but of course you can feel free and use your favorite one. As you can see right now, this folder is empty, so the first thing that I'm going to do is to open up the terminal, which is already built in VS Code. In order to open up the terminal, you need to go to View and click the terminal, or you can just use a shortcut, which is Ctrl plus backtick. It's placed right above the Tab key. Alright, let's go ahead and generate a brand new React application. For that, we have to run the command npx create React app, followed by the name of the application, which is going to be Task Manager. Actually, this process takes a couple of minutes, so I'll be back once it is done. Okay, so the React app is generated. We have here some default files and folders, and now I'm going to open this application into the browser. For that, we have to run npm start. By the way, in order to run this command, you must have installed Node.js, otherwise you won't be able to run the application. I mean, you won't be able to use npm, which stands for the Node Package Manager. I hope you already know this stuff and you already have installed Node.js. Alright, so the application is up and running. Let's go ahead and organize our working environment. I mean, let's place the editor and the browser side by side to make the working process more convenient. As we already said, React generates some default files inside of a source folder. I'm going to delete all of them and start from scratch. As you can see, the app has crashed because we don't have here any working file in the src folder. Let's go ahead and create index.js file in which I'm going to bring in React and React DOM. For that, I just need to type imr and imrd. Actually, I'm using a package called ES7 React Redux Snippets, which is a great package because it allows us to write the code using some shortcuts, and actually it saves our time. So you can go ahead and install it. Okay, next I'm going to import app component, which right now doesn't exist, but I will create it in a second. It's going to be placed in components folder. And finally, let's render the app component. For that we need React DOM dot render. Then we have to pass here the app component. And we need to select the root div element, which actually is placed in index.html file. So let's go ahead and select this element using getElementById method. Let's insert here id root. Alright, so as I said, I have to create the app component. So first of all, let's create a new folder and call it components. And then inside this folder, I'm going to create a component called app.js. Okay, now it's time to insert some boilerplate inside of the app.js file and actually make our application work. For that, I'm going to use the shortcut RAFCE. This gives us an import statement to bring in React. Also, it generates a functional component with an export default statement. Let's go ahead and inside the div element, insert app. So once we save this code, then the text app will be rendered on the page. So it means that the application is working fine. Alright, that's good. Actually, I wanted to tell you that throughout this tutorial, we're going to take care of the functionality of this application because I don't want to waste time on styling. So I will use ready style sheet. I'm going to create an app.css file in which I will insert all the styles that we need for this application. Actually, you can grab the CSS code from the project source files, which are uploaded on GitHub, and you can find the link in the description. So let's go ahead and bring the CSS for this application. Alright, so we are ready to start building our app. The first thing that I'm going to do is to create the state, then insert a couple of tasks in that state manually, and then render them on the page. Actually, there are a couple of ways to create and manage the state. You can use either class-based components, or maybe Redux or Context API and hooks. As we already said, we will manage our state and share it through the components using context and hooks. So let's go ahead and create a new folder. I'm going to call it context. And then inside this folder, create a file called task list context.js. So first of all, let's go ahead and import React. For that, we need to type imr. Then also we will need a function called createContext, which actually allows us to create context, and also we need to get one of the React hooks, useState, which is used to create the state. Alright, now let's go ahead and create context. For that we need export, and we have to create variable const task list context. Actually, you can call it whatever you want. It should be equal to create context function. So this is going to create the context for us, and we'll save it in this variable here. At this point, it won't do much for us because we haven't created or provided any data yet. So after that, we need to create a component which will include the state. Let's call it task list context provider. Again, you can call it what you want, but as a convention, we use the name of the context followed by the provider. Let's return here just plain div element. I'm going to pass here task list context. And finally, I'm going to say export default task list context provided. Alright, so we created context and now it's time to take care of the state. We're going to do that using useState, which we already have imported. So let's use this function. Actually, this hook accepts an argument which should be the initial state. So I'm going to insert in it an array. And then inside that array, I'm going to pass a couple of objects. Each of them will have a task and ID properties. So let's go ahead and do that. The first task is going to be, let's say, read the book with the ID 1. Then I'm going to duplicate this object twice. As the second task, let's go ahead and insert wash the car. ID should be 2. As for the third one, let's write some code with the ID 3. So we have here an array as an initial value of this piece of state. This function returns to us an array with 2 values. The first one is going to be the actual data, I mean the array of those objects. As for the second one, it should be the function, which we're going to use to edit or update the data. In order to bring those values, we have to use an array destructuring. Let's pass in the first value and call it tasks. As for the second one, as I said, it's going to be the function, so I'm going to call it setTasks. So each time when we need to update the data, I mean this piece of state, we should do that using the setTasks function. Alright, so the state is created and now I'm going to render those tasks on the page as a list. In order to do that, I'm going to create another component inside the components folder. I'm going to call it tasklist.js. Inside that file, I'm going to create a functional component. For that, we can type the following shortcut, RAFCE. So it has generated the functional component. Let's go ahead and insert here task list for a while. Okay, now we need to import one of the hooks called useContext. Actually, useContext hook allows us to bring in the context that we have already created. I mean, it returns the current context value. Besides that, we need to import the context itself. So let's import task list context from the context folder. We need to grab task list context. Alright, so in the context file we created the state which includes an array of tasks, and in order to render them on the page, first of all we have to get access to that array. So I'm going to use useContext hook, which accepts one argument, and it's the context itself. Now we can use destructuring and get the tasks from the state. Alright, so right now we have access to tasks array, and in order to render list on the page, we have to loop through this array using one of the array helper methods called map. So inside the development, I'm going to return UL with the class name list, which actually will be used for styling. By the way, we didn't connect the CSS file to our application yet. So let's go ahead and do that. We have to go to the app.js file and import CSS file. We have to go up one directory and we have to indicate the name of the file. Right now, nothing happens, just the margin and padding are removed from this text here. Alright, let's go back to the task list component. As we said, we have to map through the array. For that, let's open here curly braces because we need to write some JavaScript. So I'm going to say tasks.map. Then we need to pass in an arrow function with the current item. It's going to be the task. And then we have to return the list item with the content of the task. In this case, I'm not going to use just the li element because it would be better if we create a separate component for each item. So inside the components folder, let's create a new component. I'm going to call it task.js. Then let's go ahead and generate some boilerplate for a functional component. So here, instead of the div element, I'm going to return li element with the class name list item. Actually, it will include a couple of elements. The first one is going to be the span. This element will include the content, or in other words, the title of the task. Right now, let's just insert task title. Next, I'm going to insert here div element, which will include two different buttons. I mean buttons to delete the task and to edit it. So let's open button element and assign to it class names btn delete and task btn. Then I'm going to insert here an icon, which is going to be the font awesome icon. So first of all, let's go ahead and grab the CDN link for font awesome. I'm going to search for font awesome CDN.js. Go to the very first link here and then copy the first link. We have to insert it in the index.html file, which is placed inside the public folder. Let's open here the link tag and paste CDN as the value of each reference attribute. Okay, let's go back to the task component and insert here I element with the class names FAS, FA-trash-alt. This button is going to be for deleting the task. We need a similar one for editing. So let's go ahead and duplicate this button. I'm going to change the class name. Instead of btn delete, we need btn edit. And also change the class name of I element. We need fa-pan. Alright, that's it for now regarding the task component. Right now, still there is nothing on the page, but we will fix that soon. Let's go back to the task list component in which we were mapping through the array. At first, I'm going to import the task component. It's placed in the same folder. And then return down below this component. Alright, now let's go to app.js file, import task list component. And then down below, insert this component inside the development. So once we save this file, then we will get an error. The reason is that we have not created a context provider yet, and therefore we are not able to share the state through the components. So we have to go to our context file, and down below, instead of the div element, we have to return task list context dot provider. It should have one property called value, which actually will include the actual data from the state, in this case tasks. So we need to open double curly braces and we have to pass in tasks. And finally, we need to wrap with this provider the entire application that will allow us to share the state through the different components. So at first, we need to pass here props.children. this refers to all the components which will be wrapped by the context provider. And also we have to pass the props as an argument in our functional component. The last thing that we have to do is to go to app.js file, then import the task list context provider. And lastly, let's wrap the entire app with this provider. Alright, once we save this file, then finally we will get the list on the page. Right now we have just a hard-coded task title as the content of the items, but we will fix that soon. Before that, I'm going to add here a couple of div elements in order to make our app looking better. We have one div element. Let's go ahead and assign to it class name container. Then inside it, open another div with the class name app wrapper. Then again, we need to create another div element, which should have class name main. And finally, let's move up the task list component. So once we save, then our application will get a much better look. As you can see, all the tasks have the same title, and actually we don't need it. We have to get the proper titles from the state, and for that we have to go to the task list component and assign a property to task component, which is going to be task. Then we have to assign to it the current task item. After that, let's go to the task component. We need to get access to the task item, so I'm going to use destructuring. And then inside this span element, instead of the hard-coded task title, we need to pass task.task, which actually is a property of the object in the state. So as you can see, now we have here the actual tasks from the state and not the hard-coded content. Actually, I think it's not quite nice to use the task as the name of the item and the name of the property as well. So I'm going to change it into a title and also change the task into the title in task component as well. Alright, before we move on, I'd like to mention that we have here a tiny problem. If we open up the console, we will find the warning saying that we need the key property for each list item. In this case, I'm going to use the ID as the key. So let's go ahead and add here key property with value task.id. Alright, that's it about the task list component. Next, I'm going to take care of the input field. I mean the input field which we need to use to add the tasks. So I'm going to create a new component. I'm going to call it taskform.js. Then create a functional component. Use again the shortcut RAFCE. So the form component will include an input field and two buttons to add the tasks and to clear them. So let's create a form element with the class name form. Then insert in it input element with the type text. Then assign to it class name task input. And use placeholder attribute with the value add task. Also, I'm going to use an attribute called required. Actually, this attribute won't let us submit the form until it's empty. So that's why we are using it. Next, let's open development with the class name buttons and insert in it button element with the type submit. Also assign to it class names btn and add task btn. And as the value, let's assign to it add task. Then I'm going to duplicate these elements. Let's get rid of the type attribute and also change the class name. We need here clear btn. And finally, change the value, make it clear. Okay, so the task form component is created, and in order to render it on the page, we have to go to app.js file. First of all, we need to import this component. It's placed in the same folder. So we need here the name of the file, task form. And then let's go ahead and place it right above the task list component. Alright, so as you can see, the input field with its buttons is displayed on the page. Before we move on and start to work on the functionality, I'm going to create and render the header component. I mean the heading task manager. So let's create a new component and call it header.js. This component will be a kind of simple one. We just need to render a single heading. So let's generate functional components. Then assign to div element class name header. And insert in it h1 heading element with the content task manager. Okay, now let's go to app.js file, import header component. And pass it right above the div element, which has the class name main. Okay, so as you can see, the header component is displayed on the page as well. Alright, so we have created all the elements and components, and now it's time to take care of the functionality of the application. So we need to create different functions to add, delete, clear, and edit tasks. Let's go ahead and start with adding the tasks. I'm going to create those functions in the context file. So after the state, let's create function and call it add task. This function is going to take one parameter and it will be title. So in order to create a new task, we need to define its title and ID, and also we have to add a newly created task to the current state. It means that we have to update the state when we add a new task. As we already said, when we are going to update the state, in this case tasks array, we have to use setTasks function. So to add a new task to the current array, we need to create a brand new array. I mean to replace the current one, and we have to spread out the content from the current array. For that we can use the spread operator, which is expressed by 3 dots, and we have to pass here tasks. Then we have to add a new object with title property, which should have the value title. But according to ES6 syntax, if the property and the value are the same, we can leave here just title. Besides that, we need ID because each object in the state includes a unique ID. There are a couple of ways to generate a unique ID, and the easiest one is to use a package called UUID. So I'm going to install this package. We have to run npm install UUID. Once the installation process is done, we need to bring this package in. So we have to import UUID from UUID. And then we have to call this function as the value of ID property. Alright, that's it about add task function. Now I have to pass it in a provider in order to use it from other components. So now let's go to the task form component and then bring in context. We have to import task list context from the context folder, and we have to grab task list context. Also, we need to use context hook. So let's go ahead and bring it. Now, in order to get access to add task function, we need to call use context hook with the argument task list context. After that, we can use destructuring to grab the add task function from the store. Alright, so we have access to add task function, and we need to execute this function when we submit the form. So we need two different things here. We have to set up the onSubmit event, and we have to grab the value from the input field. So we need to assign to form element onSubmit event. It will take the function, and I'm going to call it handle submit. We'll create this function in a second. And also we need onChange event for the input element. It will take another function, so let's call it handle change. Using this function, we will grab the value from the input field. Let's at first create the handle change function. As the parameter, we need to pass here an event object. Then let's duplicate this function and change the name. Make it handle submit. In case of handle submit function, we have to prevent the default action of the submit button. I mean, if we click the submit button, then it will reload the page. Actually, we don't need it, so in order to avoid this kind of thing, we have to use e.prevent default method. So as we said, it prevents the default action of submitting the form. Alright, now we have to create the state in which we would store the current value of the task. I mean the title of the task. First of all, let's import use state hook. And then down below, insert. We need destructuring with two values, title and then the function set title. And I'm going to set title as empty string using use state hook. Okay, now in order to grab the value from the input fields and store it in the title, we have to use set title function with the argument e.target.value. So if we run title to the console and then start typing in the input field, we will get the values in the console. So it means that the value is stored in the title. Okay, the only thing that we have to do to add the task to the list is to call the add task function. We have to call it inside handle submit function, and we have to pass an argument title, and also we need to define the value for the input element as a title as well. Let's get rid of console.log from here, then go ahead and type something in the input field. So once we click add task button, then the task will be added to the field. Alright, so now we already can add tasks to the list. Actually, we have here a little issue. Once we add the task, we have to clear the input field. For that, we just need to set the title as the empty string. Alright, now if we test again, then you'll find that everything works fine, and we can move on and start to work on deleting the tasks. For that, let's go back to context file and create a new function. I'm going to call it remove task. This function should take one parameter, and it's going to be an ID. Alright, again we need to use set tasks function because we need to update the current state. So to remove a task from the list, we have to use one of the array helper methods, which is a filter. this method returns filtered array based on some condition. So let's go ahead and use it. I'm going to say tasks.filter, then pass here an arrow function with the current item task. So we have to filter an array, and for that we have to use the following condition: task.id not equals to id. So according to this condition, the filter method will keep the item in an array, or it will filter the item out. If this condition is true, then the ID of the current task does not equal the actual ID, and the task will be kept in an array. If it is false, then the task will be filtered out, and eventually we will get back a new array with deleted tasks. Alright, that's it about this function. We have to pass it down in context provider. Then we have to go to the task component and call this function when we click the delete button. So first of all, we have to bring in useContext hook. Also, we need to import context. So we need to import task list context from context folder. After that, let's go ahead and grab remove task function from the context. So we need to use here useContext with the argument task list context. And finally, we need to call remove task when we click the button. So we need onClick event. As you know, this function accepts one argument, which is ID, so I have to pass here an arrow function and then call remove task with the argument task.id. Okay, if we click the delete button, then the task will be removed from the list. Alright, so with the remove task function we are done. We are able to delete tasks from the list. Next up, I'm going to work on clearing the entire list. So we have to go back to the context file and create a new function. I'm going to call it clear list. Actually, this function is going to be a kind of simple one. The only thing that I have to do is to set tasks as an empty array. Then, as usual, we have to pass down this function in the provider. Then let's go to the task form component, grab clear list function from the context, then use onClick event for the clear button, and finally pass here clear list function. So if we click the clear button, then the entire list will be deleted. Alright, that's it about clear functionality. Before we move on to the next step, I'm going to do one more thing. Once the list is empty, I want to display some text, like no tasks. Let's go to the task list component. So we have to use the conditional rendering using the ternary operator. So if there exists a length of tasks, it means that we have at least one task in the list, and we have to render a list. Otherwise, we have to display the text no tasks. So let's open curly braces right under the div element. As a condition, let's pass here tasks.length. So if this is true, if there exists the task, then we have to render UL element. But if it is false, if a list is empty, then I'm going to display div element, which should have class name no tasks. And we have to pass here no tasks. Alright, so if I clear the list, then we will see that there are no tasks. Okay, so that's it about the clear functionality. The next thing that we have to do is to make the edit button work. This part is going to be a little bit challenging, unlike the previous parts. So once we click the edit button, we have to grab the current item's title, put it in the input field, Also, we're going to change the value of the button from add to edit. And once we change the content of a task and click the edit button, then it should be updated. Alright, let's go ahead and do that. First of all, I'm going to create a new state in which we will store the editable task. Let's destructure two values, edit item, and also we need set edit item. And I'm going to set edit item as null. Next, we need to create a function which should find an item that we need to update. So let's go ahead and create function with the name findItem. This function should accept one parameter and it's going to be an ID. So in order to find the item, we have to use one of the array helper methods, which is called find. In general, this function loops through the array and finds an item according to some condition. In this case, we have to compare the current item's ID and the actual ID. So let's create a variable, call it item. It should be equal to tasks.find. I'm going to pass here an arrow function with the current item task. So as we said, we have to compare the current item's ID and the actual ID. So we need here task.id triple equals to ID. Okay, once we find a needed item, then we have to update the state and make this item the editable one. So we need set edit item and we have to pass here item. Alright, let's go ahead and call this function. First of all, we need to pass it down below in context provider. Then go to task.js file. We have to call this function once we click the edit button. So let's go ahead and grab findItem function from the context. Then assign to edit button on click event. We have to pass here arrow function and we have to call function findItem with the argument task.id. Okay, after that we have to create a function for editing. So let's go ahead and go back to context file, create new variable. I'm going to call the function edit task. So this function should take two parameters. Those will be two properties of the task object. I mean the title and ID. Actually, during the update of the task, we don't need to change the ID of the item. Therefore, we have to use a map method. So I'm going to create a new variable and I'm going to call it new tasks. So we're going to replace the current array with a new one in which we will pass the edited item. So we need to use again the map method. Then let's insert here arrow function with the current item task. And now we have to use a conditional statement. I'm going to check if task.id equals to actual ID. If this condition is true, then we have to return a new object with the actual title and ID. Otherwise, if this condition is false, we have to return the current task item. Alright, next we have to update the state. For that we have to use setTasks function and we have to set the value of tasks as new tasks. Okay, that's it about the edit function. Let's pass it down in the provider. Also, we need to pass here edit item as well, because we need to get access to it from the task form component. So let's go ahead and go to the task form component. So what we have to do here is that we have to look at how edit items value is changing. I'm going to use another React hook called useEffect. Actually, it is similar to the components lifecycle method such as component did mount, it re-renders component once the piece of state is updated. So let's go ahead and import this hook. Then down below we have to call this function, and we have to pass an arrow function in it. Okay, so now we have to check if edit item equals to null or not. First of all, let's grab it from the context. Also, I'm going to bring in edit task function. Then down below, use if statement, in which we have to check if edit item does not equal to null. If this is true, it means that we are in the process of editing the item. Therefore, we have to change the value of a title and set it as the title of edit item. So we need set title with the argument edit item dot title. If this condition is false, then we have to set title to an empty string. So we need else statement, and then set title with the argument empty string. And finally, we need to run this hook only when the value of edit item updates. And to do that, we need to pass here the second argument in square brackets, and we have to indicate here edit item. Again, use effect hook will run only if edit item is updated. Alright, let's go ahead and test how it works. Let's run to the console, edit item. If I click the edit button, then the title will appear in the input field, and also we will get the editable item in the console. If I change the title and click the button, then it will be added as a new task because the edit task function is not executed yet. So we need to run it once the form is submitted. Therefore, we have to do it in handle submit function. Before that, we have to use if statement, because we need to check if edit item equals to null or not. So if it is true, then we have to run those two functions. And if it is false, then it means that we are editing the task. Therefore, we have to call edit task function in else statement. As you know, this function takes two parameters, title and ID. So let's insert here title as the first argument, and then as an ID we have to pass edit item.id. Alright, now it should work. Let's click the edit button, change the title. Then if I click the button, the task will be updated. Okay, so it works fine, but still we have to do a couple of things. As you see, the title of the task stays in the input field. It's not cleared, and also, as we said, we have to change the value of the button from add to edit. In order to clear the input field, we have to set edit item back to null. Let's go back to the context file, and in edit task function write set edit item with value null. Okay, let's check again. If I edit the task, then the input field will be cleared. Next up, let's take care of the button. Instead of this value, we have to use a conditional statement. So let's go ahead and open curly braces. We have to check if edit item equals to null or not. So as the condition, I'm going to pass here edit item not equals to null. Actually, we can pass here just edit item, because if it is null, it means that it returns false, and if it is not equal to null, then it returns true. So if this is true, then we have to make the value of the button edit task. Otherwise, we need add task. Actually, we can change the conditions above as well. We need here just edit item. And here we need not edit item. Okay, let's test again. If I click the edit button, then the value of the button will be changed, and once I edit the item, the value of the button will be changed back to add task. Alright, actually we are almost done. The application is working fine. The only thing that we have to do is to save the data in the browser local storage, because when we reload the page, then the current data is lost. Let's go to the context file. First of all, let's clear the array in the state. So in order to add data to local storage, we have to use its built-in function called setItem. And we have to do that using the useEffect hook. So let's import it. Then run it down below. So now we need local storage with this setItem function. This function takes two arguments. The first one is the name of the collection. We have to use string value. As for the second one, it should be the actual array. But instead of just passing an array, we have to transform it into JSON format. For that, we have to use a method called stringify. So we need json.stringify, and we have to pass here tasks array. Also, we need to pass here the second argument, tasks, because we need to run useEffect hook once this array is updated. Okay, let's go ahead and test how it works. I'm going to open local storage. For that, we have to go to the application and then find local storage. For now, as you see, we have an empty array, but once I add some tasks, then they will be ended up here in the local storage. But if I refresh the page, then they will be gone. So in order to fix that, we have to define the initial value of the state where we should store an array from the local storage. So let's go ahead and create a new variable. I'm going to call it initial state. So in order to get data from the local storage, we have to use a function called getItem. So we need local storage dot getItem. As the parameter, we have to pass here the name of the collection, tasks. If there won't be any data in local storage, then we should set initial state as an empty array. So I'm going to use OR operator followed by the empty array. Besides that, we need to parse data, because as we said, it is stored in JSON format. For that, we have to use json.parse method. And finally, let's insert here the initial state instead of that empty array. Alright, let's go ahead and test once again how it works. Let's add a couple of tasks. Then if I reload the page, data will be saved and we will get here the list of tasks. Alright, finally we are done. The application is working perfectly and I hope you enjoyed this project. So if you like this video, then please thumbs up, comment below and subscribe to our channel, because lots of interesting projects are coming up. Okay, see you in the next tutorial.